I took the two best models from Anthropic and let them do exactly the same job to compare them. Which one is the best one? So in my experiment, I used Opus 4.8 and the new model announced a few days ago, which is Fable 5, to read 134 transcripts from YouTube videos and process them into a knowledge graph. And then I started using these graphs, having the comparison between the outcomes from my questions. The reason I wanted to run this experiment was that all models are pretty good and they're compared with each other in understanding the context at the input. And my goal was to find which one of those two models can do a better job in understanding the human words and what kind of reasoning can it give us in our knowledge base. So here was my methodology. I took all those 134 YouTube videos from multiple different channels, from incredible channels. I would totally recommend them for following. Most of them are about the knowledge graphs and digital brains. They're doing pretty good job and totally recommend them. Then I started processing. So the first step was to use Opus 4.8 to analyze those transcripts and create the knowledge graph into FalkorDB. For that reason, I created two MD files, a skill file about exactly what is the workflow and the process, and the ontology one, which describes what kind of outcomes do we want to extract for each video. Into this process, we had to analyze also the images, what is the style on the image, the titles, descriptions, and the whole transcript. And the goal was to understand similarities, common patterns, and best practices from those successful YouTubers. So 4.8 model used exactly the same instructions and had exactly the same methodology like Fable 5. And here we can see the nodes graph from Opus 4.8. We count 10,000 nodes and 16,000 edges. And in here we have the outcome from Fable 5. We have almost 500 nodes more and 3,000 have more edges, more connections. Running those two processes with separate models, I recognize two big differences about the cost and the time performance. So Opus 4.8 took 2 hours and a half working totally autonomously, processing all the data. I didn't touch my laptop for these 2 hours and a half. And it consumed 50% of my tokens for the current session. And just to let you know, I'm running a 20 max Claude account. So I had a bunch of tokens available, and Claude was able to use all of them. On the other hand, using Fable 5, the total working time was 1 hour and something. And the interesting thing here is that when the process hit the first 40% of the videos, it consumed all of the available tokens from the session. Something important to mention, the entire session was used only for these jobs. So Fable 5 had to wait for 3.5 hours to continue the next session for the next 40%, and then it took some tokens for the third session. Putting down the numbers, when each session takes for 5 to 4 hours, this is the time range, it took totally almost 8 hours to be completed. So no matter what was the final working time for the model, for me, the actual time was 8 hours of work. Again, it worked totally autonomously without me being on my laptop. So let's see if these pain points using Fable 5 against to Opus 4.8 was worth it. Here I have a full audit report generated looking into my two nodes graphs, making the comparison of the outcomes looking to specific KPIs. Here, for example, we can see the grounding rate, which is a KPI that can show us to what extent the final nodes graph represents the initial input. And the opposite KPI for exactly the same thing is the hallucination rate, which is to what extent it understood the initial input. And we see here the most important big difference that Opus 4.8 had 93.8% for grounding rate and quite higher hallucination rate, almost 5 times above Fable 5. And as we scroll, we can see the rest of big differences. We see here that we have more nodes in Fable 5, but this doesn't mean anything. We have more edges. Also, it doesn't mean that this is the KPI we have to take and make a decision, deciding between the two models. We can see here another KPI is very useful from the health check. This is, by the way, the health check I ran on all of my nodes graphs. And I see here big differences. We can see here that in claim atomicity, Opus is a winner, but with not that big difference. And as we scroll down, we can see the graphs here about the trust. Fable 5 looks more trustworthy. You can see all the rest of them. The full report will be added into the description of this video, so you can go and look at that. But let's go into the most important, the final comparison table, which explains us the final outcome and the quality of the nodes graph, building a digital brain from those transcripts. We can see here that in most of the cases, Fable 5 becomes the winner, but the differences between the percentages are quite close, but in some cases they have big difference. What we have to put into account is the final outcome and also the cost of having them. But for me, all those are just some KPIs and some calculations. The way I'm evaluating the quality of a nodes graph is by talking to the graph using the model. And here's the next thing. I have already prepared a couple of questions to test the knowledge and the intelligence that can give us these knowledge, those two nodes graphs. So I have the question, which tools are taught by at least two channels for different problems? For it, explain how the framing differs and which framing co-occurs with better performance. So I created those questions that have complex connections between different things coming up from multiple different videos. So what I want to do is I will take them and I will come into my Claude inside VS Code. And I will run the first experiment by selecting the model, and I will give it this question. And I will say, using the connection for the social media nodes graph, I want you to answer the following question. Use only this nodes graph and none other nodes graph, because this is created with Opus 4.8. Now let's see here how Opus 4.8 can answer the question into his own nodes graph. Opus. And now I'm going to give exactly the same question to another model. Models, perfect. And I will say again, I want you to use the social media Fable 5 knowledge graph to answer the following question. Be careful to use only this knowledge graph to answer this question. And I give it to it. Now let's see the outcome. I can tell you that running other experiments with those two models, I can say that Fable 5 is really faster and it's less lazy to query my knowledge graphs. So for example, I use it to draft a couple of emails using my knowledge graph inside Brain Graph, and Fable 5 was able to query deeper and deeper without me giving it a specific skill. While in Opus 4.8, we have to make this adjustment using the skills. So let's see here how it works. An interesting experiment we can run also is to query the nodes graph created with Fable 5 using Opus 4.8 for the queries. What is the difference from this experiment? We can see how the same model finding different knowledge graph with more context on it, how well it can answer the same questions. But to run all those experiments and even processing all those questions I have listed, it will take a time for a full video or even for a live. So let me know in the comments if you would be interested for a comparison like that, or feel free to join in one of the weekly mastermind sessions we run every Wednesday and every Friday. So we can run these kind of experiments live together. So we see that 4.8 took more time because of the complexity of our question and the needed multiple relationships to answer this question. These models, in both cases, have to search deeper and deeper and recognize the second, the third, and the fourth layer of relationships. Okay, Opus 4.8 started first and it completed also first. And tell us how he ran his queries. Perfect. Obsidian, the cleanest case. Claude Code, framing. Claude model app. Right, this makes sense. That one moved to the fourth one. And here we see that we have Obsidian, and we have also Obsidian here in the first position. And the second one is Claude Code. Like here, the third one is Claude Model, Claude Cowork, okay, Notion, ChatGPT, and OpenClaw. So Fable gave us a deeper analysis in here. Now let's run a second question in the same approach. Using the same knowledge graph as a source, I want you to answer the following question. Boom. Oops. Using the same knowledge graph as knowledge source, I want you to answer the following question. Boom. And now let's wait to see what's going to be the final outcome. Fable found something and he wants to verify it. That's good. Opus is still thinking. Come on, guys. Come on, guys. Show me those channels' best practices. Okay, Fable 5 completed first, but it started also first. Yeah. I see almost the same speed for both questions we ran. And social media, Opus 4. Building beautiful websites with Claude Code is too easy. From zero to your first agentic AI workflow in 26 minutes. Turn Claude Code into your executive assistant in 27 minutes. These are the patterns they followed. I guess from here, we can see that the formula is title plus hooked. Okay, and give us some examples here. Let's see if this is the found one also from the other side. Outcome promise, title, outcome promise hook, taking head text thumbnail. All right. Here we see outcome promise, bold claim, taking head text, outcome promise, taking head text. So Fable recognized this one as another methodology. Some findings, bold claim variant, the cleaner signal, 9 videos in the corpus use it, 3 land in the top kernel, and 0 in the bottom. And both of them explain us their methodology. Here, it gives me some explanation about the methodology, a deeper one. I can say that in both cases, I like the outcome of the responses. We don't have errors. We don't have in the response something that is not. What I like more in Fable 5 so far is the fact that it queries immediately the deeper connections into the same node graph without me saying a word, which means that it understands what I want it to do without me telling it, which makes it more useful friend. Now, the initial question was, is it worth to have Fable 5 instead of Opus 4.8? Are these outcomes a reasonable reason to switch from Opus 4.8 to Fable 5? First of all, we have to think about the outcome. And I can tell you also something from my experience building nodes graphs so far using other platforms and other LLMs in the market with similarly great reasoning. The best way to work with models is not only to compare them like that. What I do instead is I'm using the best models and I'm trying to push the other models, give me the high quality outcome like the best ones. And that way, what I achieve is to have high quality outcome with less cost, because this decision is not a decision about who is a better one, but is who is better in combination of outcome and the cost. I find Opus 4.8 being very good model in the market to do those manual works with Claude Code, and I'm very glad having it. But for my other workflows, I'm using other models, and I use them to recognize patterns of thinking from Opus 4.8, and I saw Gemini giving me similarly high quality outcomes like Opus 4.8. And from my experience, Fable 5 kills my token account, which means for me it's not worth it to remain out of tokens for this extra quality of extra higher quality on the outcomes. So at the moment, I would not think switching my processes to this model, but definitely I'm using it already to do some tiny tasks with deeper research and a faster time. So we have to keep everything in a balance. If you want to learn more about building with AI and building for AI, join into the weekly masterminds around every Wednesday and every Friday, 1 p.m. EST time. We build together and we learn together. Most of the focus is building solutions that matter for our businesses, and they can help us to grow our businesses using AI.